Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to introduce this fantastic panel, and I really want to applaud you for being so dedicated to issues of global education, for being here at 8 o'clock in the morning. I understand there's many of you streaming throughout the conference, and we're super excited to have you here. Obviously, you guys are interested in these issues, and if you want to continue the conversation, there's another panel on innovation in China, which I will be moderating at 4 p.m. in the Idaho room at the Little America Hotel. But welcome to the panel From Silk Road to Silicon Valley. Joining us will be Victor Hu, who's the Deputy CEO of China First Capital Group, Cindy Wenjuan, the CEO of VIPKID, Dr. Yachao Liu, who's the co-founder and board director of TAL Education Group, Rick Levin, the CEO of Coursera, and the panel's moderator will be Anthony Chang, the CEO of Global Education Learning. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists.
Get your fans here. Somebody has a fan club out here.
Yeah, exactly. That must be him over there.
Yep. But not me.
Also for you guys. Maybe.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know we're competing against yoga, and I thank you guys everyone for attending this conference. Hopefully, by the end of the session, we'll all be even more enlightened than had you gone to yoga. So why don't we get right into it? We're very lucky today to have a phenomenal group of panelists, a very distinguished group of folks that have built successful businesses in China. We've already introduced all our panelists, but let me just introduce everyone real quick. This is Victor from CFCG. This is Cindy from VIPKID, Rick from Coursera, Yachao from TAL, and Joy, who will be helping us with some of the translation, also from TAL. Yes. Today, this panel, we're going to really talk about a few things related to China. First is really the current state of Chinese education market. We'll then go into talk about some of the minefields and the gold fields of China, and just talk about some of the experiences that American and other Western companies have had trying to enter into the China market. And then lastly, we're going to try and learn a little bit about what I think the general perception has always been that Chinese companies copy the IP, copy content, from the West. But things have obviously very much changed. Today, China actually has been a leader in innovation, and I'd like to learn from the panel in terms of what they're seeing in the market that we could possibly leverage from China. Before I begin, I just want to take a quick show of hands just to understand what the composition of this audience. How many of you actually have very strong presence in China right now? That have real presence, real business presence. Okay, aside from Yachao's fan club. Great. How many of you actually have taken a trip to China, been very interested, but for whatever reason, have put a pause button? Okay, well, this panel's for you. Why don't we get right into this? I'm going to pose the first question to Cindy. You started VIPKID roughly 3 years ago, and obviously explosive growth. I mean, that's the best way to describe the company at this point. And just an interesting anecdote. I actually was doing a little bit of research on VIPKID, and I saw an article from December, and it mentioned 5,000 teachers and 50,000 students. I met with your folks yesterday, and they actually kept correcting it upwards.
Every second.
Today, yes, and we had to stop it, as of yesterday. But as of yesterday, it was roughly 12,000 teachers and 120,000 students. So almost a 3x increase in just 5 months. That's just amazing. So it's safe to say that you understand China, and so from an outsider looking into the market, what would you say are the 3 things that we really need to understand?
Yeah, then I would start probably by saying education in China, particularly after school tutoring, is perceived by the parents as a investment, really. That's why 15% of our household income goes to supplementary education. We're talking about a $75 billion market, so that's the first thing. But second thing I want to say is we have a big discrepancy between great quality of education content and resources with the demand.
Yeah.
If I may use the sector that I'm in as example, there are only like 30,000 teachers coming from the US, Canada, UK, and Australia that teaches in China. But think about our 150 million kids everywhere. We might need 500,000, 1 million teachers. Think about the gap. And then if you're talking about rural education, there's even more we need to do. Thirdly, I think it would be the market is today still very highly fragmented, and there is the opportunity that we can bring consolidation to online.
Got it.
To give an example, there are 50,000 children's language training centers in China, businesses. And if you talk about the top 10, it only counts for 7% of total market share.
Got it.
But then we're going very swiftly from a offline market to a online possibility here.
Got it.
So.
But as you were developing VIPKID over the last couple of years, what were some of the key consumer insights that you kind of latched onto to be able to get? Really, it's the parents, it's the moms, dads that are paying for your service for their kids.
Right. Well, as one of the teachers I met in Atlanta a week ago said, everywhere in the world is the same. Parents love their kids, teachers love teaching, children love to learn. And then the thing is really, what is the true value you're bringing to the table, regardless of the format of service you're delivering, online or offline? So our consumer insight would be, you have to keep up the quality.
Yeah.
Keep improving the quality, making sure every of your customer likes you, loves you.
Yeah.
They're not only there to just use your product, but also willing to spread the word, if you will. 60% of our newly student every month coming from referrals. Parents talk about us on WeChat, on Facebook, everywhere. So that'd be the most important insight. What is the true value you bring to the table?
Great. Great. Well, moving along to Yachao and the TAL experience. Obviously TAL was founded back in 2003 and was initially providing personalized tutoring services, so very labor intensive. Obviously the company has evolved over the last 15 years. Can you talk about that evolution and how just because you're a pioneer in the Chinese education market, how has this evolution occurred?
中国的市场呢，在过去其实跟其他的行业是一样的，是劳动密集性比较多一点，现在正在进入一个资本和科技密集型的状态。
So just like all the other industries back in China, the education industry has already evolved from labor incentive to capital incentive and the technology incentive kind of industry in China.
我们 TL 原来是一家运营型的公司，现在也正在向科技型的公司进行转变。
And we used to be a company focused on operation, but now we kind of shifted from operation-driven to data-driven or technology-driven company.
在中国的一线城市呢，随着中产阶级的崛起呢，其实家长对这个教育的需求正在从过去的有学可上，现在变得对品质有更高的要求。
And China market is huge. We have to talk about different needs from different group of the families. For example, for the first-tier cities in China, the parents' need for education for their kids has kind of changed from getting only education to getting high-quality education.
原来我们的主营业务是靠教师来完成上课的主要任务。
And used to be TEL's focused area is tutoring kind of a business, having the teachers to deliver the high quality training to the students.
现在我们尝试在用人脸识别的技术去采集学生上课的注意力情况，以及通过 Pad 来记录孩子的上课的学习数据。
Now what we're sharing is very exciting. We have already used technology. For example, we try to use the facial recognition, try to collect the students' emotion, gesture, and try to understand how they understand the training, the teaching. And also we are using iPad. We have developed this kind of learning analysis system. So all the data will be coming to the iPad, and also we collect data, we do the data analysis, and then later on there will be personalized training delivered to each individual students.
通过这种数据的分析呢，我们来希望能够给孩子提供个性化的学习和个性化的作业。
So we highly leverage this kind of data analysis to provide personalized learning by providing students according to their different learning pace, by providing them different study materials and also different assignments.
同时呢，中国市场除了一线城市之外，还有广大的2、3线城市，他们的需求其实主要是低成本的获取更高质量的课程资源。
And other than the first-tier cities in China, we have secondary cities and even the rural area. So for them, the big goal is how they can get high-quality education at lower cost.
就是我们呢也在尝试用录播、直播等技术呢来覆盖这些更广泛的地区。
And we are trying also to leverage technology like recorded training materials to broadcast to them, or even the live streaming technology to broadcast the online kind of training material to the students over there.
我自己呢小时候就来自于一个3线的城市，我们那个地方呢就是数学，我自己擅长数学，但是我们缺乏很好的数学竞赛教练。
And Dr. Liu is also sharing, he's coming from kind of third-tier kind of cities in China. So for him, he was very interested in math learning, but it's very difficult for him to access to those kind of high-quality math teachers.
我们现在正在尝试用全国最好的数学竞赛教练员，通过直播去给全国各地的优秀的擅长数学的孩子去，给他们讲更高端的课程。
So now what TEL is doing is we try to get all those high quality trainers, teachers in the math area, and we use live streaming technology to teach all those students, not in the first tier cities, but in the rural area, secondary kind of cities.
Is there the infrastructure available to be able to deliver that type of offering?
我们现在尝试一种教学形式，叫双师的教学形式。然后用主讲老师，也就是说专业度很高的老师来传授课堂内容。
And actually, there's one model we can share with all of you guys here is we're being very innovative. We kind of created our own kind of training model, which is like a dual teachers kind of training model. So we use one very high quality teacher who is stationed in the major city in China.
然后由当地的辅导老师来做课堂的作业批改和一些互动。
And that teacher, the high-quality teacher, is based in like Beijing, Shanghai, the first-tier cities. But in another city, there's another assistant teacher type of role, and they facilitated the teaching and also assignment kind of assessment later on.
Great. Let me switch over to Rick for a bit. So you've had a very colored, long history with China. I mean, obviously, currently through Coursera, but you're 20 years with Yale. You obviously, have seen the education market evolve. What are your perspectives on the current market and where it is today?
Sure. Well, let me make just a couple observations. First, the market for preparation to get to college is enormous, and the focus, the expenditures, like Cindy laid out, even with elementary school children. People will spend lots of money, a big fraction of disposable income, on their children's education, and that means supplemental education as well as the tuition at their schools. So the opportunities for companies like TAL and VIPKID and others is enormous. It's not, unfortunately, not Coursera's sweet spot because we have university level courses, and our salience has largely in the post-university career advancement stage of life, age 22 to 45, is where we found our sweet spot globally. For us, the problem in China is the market, the value proposition is not yet established. In the United States and Western Europe, Coursera credentials and the credentials of other providers of open online education have turned out to be quite valuable in the labor market, and so people are willing to pay for certification. But in China, it's just not established. We have 1.8 million learners in China, and most of them are between age 22 and 45, so they're using these courses, but they only consume the videos and don't take the assessments and earn the certificates. So that's one observation. It's really tilted toward pre-university admissions. Second observation about the Chinese market that we found is compared to other places on the planet, it's the most mobile intensive. Our mobile app is essentially comparable to our web offering. And in the rest of the world, the mobile usage is about 30 or 40%. In China, it's 60%. So it's much higher. And then just one more observation. This whole educational sector is just one big global community, because I just want to point out the peculiar linkage here. Our co-host at this event, Arizona State University, provides on the Coursera platform courses that lead to certification as a teacher of English as a second language. And so Cindy's teachers train using Arizona State courses on the Coursera platform. And we really are one big family.
That's awesome.
Right.
That's awesome. That's great. Switching gears a little bit, so Victor, can you talk a little bit about CFCG? I think most people in the audience know it's an investor, but if you wouldn't mind just describing your focus areas. I know you're one of the most prolific investors in China in the education space as well as outside, but would love to learn a little bit more as well as some of the trends and some of the investments that you've been seeing.
All right. We are relatively a new player in investment. We are a listed company in Hong Kong. We invest only in education only, exclusively in whole education sector. A few months ago, we invested in G8, the biggest public company in Australia on kindergartens, and become their biggest shareholder. We have also made some investments in USA, some top independent schools for technical reasons, which is not convenient for me to announce the details yet. But in a few weeks' time, I think we will announce it. The logic or the philosophy behind it is, given the huge market potential in China and I would say the high quality resources in both Europe and North America, from our perspective, mainly English-speaking countries, it is sensible to leverage the best resources both inside and outside China. So our targets ideally would be those high quality with a good brand, but with a potential China angle.
Got it.
That is a philosophy.
And is your investment strategy to help them figure out the China market? And so what are the types of I guess
the priority would be the China angle, the China story, so that we could create value for our customers in China. But on the other hand, we could help those I would say companies or schools outside China, in USA, in UK, or in Australia.
Got it.
Because there's a demand for it. There's a demand for it. At the moment in China, the demand is huge, but the supply is not there yet. Yeah.
Got it. So have you started working with some of these investments to bring them into China yet, or is it still early days?
It's still, I would say early days, but things will progress quite fast, really fast.
Great, terrific. Well, why don't we change topics a little bit and talk about American companies or Western companies' experiences in China. Rick, I mean, you started touching on this with Coursera. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what your experience has been and kind of, I think many people in the audience, Western companies, fascinated by China. How do they even start thinking about the opportunity? How do you approach the market?
We've done a lot of thinking about China and done a lot of due diligence, talking to other U.S. internet companies that have tried to establish a significant presence there. And I think the takeaway is if you're an American company and you really want to tackle the Chinese market in a big way, you need a Chinese partner, you need joint investment, you need to actually be willing to localize your product significantly, because the look and feel of the Chinese internet is quite different from the U.S. and Western Europe. So, and if you look around, the big U.S. internet companies, I mean, the truth is, no one has really succeeded in China. I mean, it's very tough to win there, and it's partly because most of these companies, the large ones, have tended to go it alone, and they end up being defeated by the Chinese rivals. I think I think Coursera is perhaps unique in that we have what kind of thing Victor was talking about. We have the brands, the American universities, the British and European universities, as our partners creating content that simply can't be replicated in China. Now we have Chinese universities producing on our platform, and they do a very good job, but there's still a tremendous interest in those foreign brands in China. And so we think there is an opportunity, if we do at some point in the future, a deep plunge into China with a Chinese partner, with a willingness to come inside the firewall and localize the product. I think we can eventually succeed. We thought very seriously about doing this a year and a half ago, but we concluded it would use up a huge amount of our bandwidth. That actually, for a small company still growing at that point, under 200 employees, we just felt we just weren't ready to tackle that challenge. But we do think it's something we definitely want to do in the future.
Well, so I mean, that brings up a really good point, right? I mean, I've helped a lot of U.S. companies try to figure out China. That's really kind of what I've been doing most of my career. And the reality is that many people sit in the boardrooms and they have a list of 20 priorities, right? At what point does China come to the top 2 or 3? I mean, in your mind, talk to me about kind of like how the stars align.
Well, that's interesting because in late 2015, Coursera began, as I think most people here know, with open content provided direct to consumer. It was a straight B2C business, consumer internet offering. And about the middle of 2015, we started to think, well, what next? And we had a list of potential new directions. And among them were extending our product from courses and groups of courses, micro-credentials, to online degrees. Another option was extending our markets from the consumer to enterprises and selling Coursera offerings into businesses and nonprofit organizations and governments for workforce development. And another thing on the list was go big in China.
Yep.
And in fact, in the end, those were the top 3 candidates for what's the best new direction, and China came in third.
Okay.
And we went with the other 2, and we have no regrets because those new directions are really helping the company grow very rapidly. But China's, it's looming there, and it's something we will tackle at some point in the future.
Got it. No, fair enough. But at the very least, right now, you're working with VIPKID here.
Oh yeah, we have, like I said, 1.8 million users in China, and the same types of courses that are popular in the U.S. and Europe are popular there. The top-ranking courses are the same ones that are top-ranking courses globally. Endering's machine learning course and Barb Oakley's Learning How to Learn course are the number 1 and 2 in China, as they are in the United States.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Cindy, obviously building off your relationship with Coursera, you've obviously also worked with a number of other U.S. companies, Western companies, to help them figure out China to be their partner.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of people, whenever we kind of start thinking about, how do you approach China? There are all these issues that you have to deal with, whether they're regulatory, whether they're, market issues, whether it's, IP protection. A lot of people are worried about their IP, obviously. And, even things like getting cash out of the country. And I think the biggest one is talent, right? what do you advise these companies? How do you make them comfortable? How do you work with them?
I think I would say everything technical is easy. Like with all regulations, how to get cash out of the country, whatever, you can always work with great consulting firms to figure things out, right? Or find it out through partnerships. But then very hard thing would be people. Like, who do you work with?
Yeah.
It could be local talents that you want to hire, or it could be companies that you choose to work with. So I actually have the same experience, vice versa, like getting to the US market, to finding people, right? I think from my experience, when I met with Rick last year in San Diego, I think he's a perfect example of the kind of partner we're looking for. Like the company, Coursera, has great content, represent best quality. Then you think about the wonderful leadership with Rick, and then also he has this investment mentality that when we were so little, we were like an infant, a baby, Rick took his time, met with me for an hour in the sunshine of San Diego. It was really hot in the noon. But then by talking to some other companies, maybe they don't really want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then they're thinking, how much revenue can you generate to me this month or next month? But then I think it's really to find out the best partner, talking about vision, talking about value, talking about growth projections, talking about what you can do together. And then you can't really think about short term, half a year, right? If you're thinking long term, then you can find the right partner you can find, and then gonna succeed.
Great.
So if we just straight out conversation into like what kind of SDK, API, or who's gonna hold the server, that's gonna be difficult.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it always comes back to the age-old, it's all about people.
It's all about people. Like for VIPKID nowadays become kind of like the teachers know about us, love about us, and then Kobe invested in us last year. And then we have the Bloomberg article, Peter really helped a lot, and GSV, Deborah and Michael has kindly introduced us to so many people. And then, goes without saying, Rob from Learn Capital sitting on Coursera's board.
Well, Rick obviously knows a lot about VIPKids. He came up with your tagline, like the Uber, or actually we're not supposed to use Uber.
Well, whatever. In this audience, it's the lift of the education field. Because, basically she takes school teachers from the US and Canada and gives them moonlighting income. They can earn supplemental income by tutoring Chinese students online. And it provides, it's a great thing. School teachers in the United States, as most people know, are underpaid, and this gives them an opportunity to earn extra income. So I think it's just a fantastic, we saw the potential in what Cindy was doing in the first conversation.
We're going to work together more to help educators improve their income,
Great.
better things.
So Yachao, how, you obviously, Tal has obviously had a lot of experience working with other companies. Can you come up with some interesting success cases for Western partners that you've been able to help bring into China?
我在分享例子之前，我其实想说一下，就是说回答一下刚才那个问题，就是关于教育，就美国教育公司进中国的这种困难。我觉得主要原因是因为教育行业不是一个简单的硬件产品，它是一个服务的分发。
Actually, before he answers your question, he's going to tackle a little bit about the previous question, why it's kind of difficult for the US education company to go to China. Because education is not only kind of distribution type of traditional business.
所以这就要求我们的教育产品的本地化和分发渠道分发的能力要特别强。
So it has like a really request to have like high quality for the distribution channels and also the high quality education product to be localized in China.
就像我们合作的一个伙伴一样，就是我们把美国的这个分级阅读教材 Reading A to Z 引入了中国。
I probably know most of people here wouldn't have heard about a name called Reading A to Z, and we help them to go to China market.
美国的合作伙伴提供了非常好的专业化的内容。
And Reading A to Z has wonderful content to provide to the students, to the families in China as well.
然后我们把它本地化了，比如说我们在帮助他们把文字出版变成了一个变成了一个 app。
And what we have done is not only just having this content and distribute it into the China market, on top of it, we have done some localization. And also, other than localization, we have even developed an app. So we try to understand our parents, our kids in a better way. And by using the app, they can better use the content.
同时呢，我们根据中国学生的需求，用语音的识别技术，帮助孩子在提高他的口语的发音水平。
And also TEL has very cool technology like the voice recognition. So we use this one on top of reading A to Z's content. So we use this technology to evaluate how the students are reading, their pronunciation.
Interesting. So basically, you took an existing piece of content and you basically repurposed it. You changed. It sounds like you changed the entire business model.
改变了很多的这个商业的模式都有一些的改变，对吗？
对，主要其实我们就是在产品的本地化上做了一些应用型的创新，同时利用我们的渠道来帮助把好的内容分发到中国的各个层次的市场。
Yes, actually, what we have done is on top of the content, we have done some kind of localized application because we understand market over there, the needs from the family, and then we find out an easier way to get the parents to adopt us, to adopt this kind of content for their kids to use.
Excellent. Very interesting. Huh. So, can you then use that overseas, or is it only in China at this point?
我们能
You
把
think
这
it's
个东西也
applicable?
拿到美国来吗？还是我们就让中国的家长用而已？
事实上，我们美国的合作伙伴看到了我们的那个基于语音识别的这种口语的这种技术之后，他们也希望把这个功能拿回美国市场。
Actually, that's a very interesting point. So the company who is providing reading A to Z content to us started to talk to us because they are interested in this kind of mobile application and also this kind of voice recognition system. So they are talking to us to see if there's any possibility they can also use it here in the US market.
Very interesting. Well, that's a great transition to our last topic about what we can learn in the West, from the China experience. Victor, you've obviously had a ton of experience looking at companies throughout the world. What's your perspective on this? Like, where can we learn from China?
I would put your question in a different way.
Okay.
The similarities and differences between the Chinese market and the US market, because if you want to say we learn from somebody, we're different. We're different. I think yesterday, congratulations to TEL, their market cap rose above $10 billion US, right?
Wow.
那不重要。
And this is the second case for the last 2 weeks that a Chinese education group, which is listed in New York Stock Exchange, whose market cap rose above $10 billion US. We all know education sector is not that big compared with healthcare, energy. That one is called a New Oriental, right? They are typical because those two companies, TEL and New Oriental, their main business model is to C. New Oriental, half of their revenue is from English, mainly English language test prep. The other half comes from K-12. Why TEL, the major bulk of the revenue comes from K-12. It's mainly at the moment is to C. I don't see these business models will be successful in USA. The reason, very simple. The public school and the independent school in USA, the systems are already quite, I would say, if not complete or mature. The parents in China, I would say, they are much more willing or ready to pay a premium for their kids' education than the parents in Europe or North America. I'm not implying that the parents in North America or Europe, they don't love their kids as much as, but they are not willing or they don't have to pay that much premium. I would say if I were looking for targets in North America or Europe, I would look for K-12 schools. I would look for those test prep or aptitude-oriented language training institutions, right? On the other hand, for the yesterday and today, we will see lots of companies. Most of them are technology-driven, data-driven. US companies, they are very successful. But you look at that business model, it's not to C, it's to B. I don't see these companies at this moment will be successful in China. Reason, simple. In USA, the university have much, much more money to spend to buy service such as SaaS, software as a service, in USA. In China, you don't have that much money because the budget on education is different. That's why when Rick said that the Chinese online users are not ready for value proposition, that's consumer again, they're different. Because in China, they're not that willing to pay for online learning, yet the mentality is different. So it's not a question from who is learning from whom. We're different. Today it's just over 8 o'clock. I'm happy to see this such a grand ballroom is already filled. They say early birds catch worms. But on the other hand, early worms are eaten by birds. We all know that. Investment, you've got to wait, right? You've got to wait. It's not just you learn from it. You can't.
Yeah, I invested in wireless earbuds about 10 years ago, and it was a little too early. But well, Cindy,
that's
what's your perspective on this? Because you're predominantly online, right?
I have to, strongly disagree with what Victor has said. I would say the world is the same. Come on, why do I have to focus so much on like China, India, US? We're all the same, right? We're all here for education. So instead of thinking offline, online, China, US, I would say, guys, learn more about China. What we're doing. First thing I would say is the total, like the operation excellence opportunity in a gigantic market. Almost 50% people buys online, and then out of the most popular Tencent games, more than 50% are under 20 years old, and then we have 800 million WeChat users. So those are great opportunities for acquisition excellence, which would, of course, enhance future growth. Secondly, I would argue we are innovative in a way that we're doing all these education research. We've been working with Stanford professors. We've using AI and ML to do a lot of things in education. So those are something is also the same. And I would say thirdly, a global perspective of all this. We talk about partnerships, right? Yep. So the opportunity to work with a global academia, great companies, think market out of your own home market will be really attractive. Right now, VIPKID has created all these small business opportunities for our teachers, 12,000 of them. Will soon be 100,000. What about 1 million? What about connecting all the students and the teachers across the globe so that this is an online cloud classroom for everyone to learn and to teach? This will be a converging world instead of one that,
I would add
your
something
point, that is diverging.
Is that okay? Is that okay? Because perhaps I overemphasize the differences between the Chinese market and US market. We have to acknowledge there are similarities, such as whether it's in USA market or in China market. The aim of education, or the big trend of education now, today, is you have to increase the efficiency of education. You have to improve the efficiency of the process of learning and teaching. Any means, any products that will help in that direction will matter, will be useful, such as individualized learning, adaptive learning.
Now we say efficacy, but then I think what we really should be thinking about in the next 20 years, will the world be different?
Yeah,
right?
I will finish that. I will speak in your favor, just a minute. That's similar to the sign. Another one is any means, any products, because I believe there are lots of educators and investors here. I'd like to just share my feeling with them. Another similarity is any means or any products that will help our children to learn happily will be useful. such as games.
觉得快乐。
Of course, I share with you that tomorrow there's no such thing called an online company. Every company has got to be online, but the model would be hybrid. O2, it's a combination of online and offline, because education is never about technology or technology only, about data only. It's got to have a face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball interaction. That's a touching of the heart. You know what I mean? Of course, online you can reach an economy at a scale you need online. It is a must. That's what I mean.
Rick, do you want to break the tie here?
I'm still reflecting on Victor's wisdom. Better to be an early bird than an early worm. I think that's just fantastic. I never thought of that before, but that's going to be our objective.
That's right.
Wait till we are a bird, and then take it on. Look, I mean, there's points on both sides. The world is globalizing. The world is becoming common in so many different ways. People hunger for education everywhere. The actual needs that online education can fill are similar in both societies. But then again, there are big differences in the educational systems that require, I think Victor's right about this, that require the need for supplemental education outside the classroom seems to be stronger. What do American parents spend their money on? They spend their money on, putting their kids through music lessons and soccer games and hockey equipment instead of, tutors, which are much less common in the U.S. than in China. So, there's differences. There's lots of similarities. I do think the internet world does have a different look and feel. I mean, there are local tastes and the Chinese market is large enough to sustain very large companies, which if they were to export, would look different in the rest of the world, would seem different. I mean, the look and feel of the Tencent or Alibaba sites are very different from the look and feel of the Western counterparts. And, and the other obstacle we haven't mentioned, but the one thing that does create a wedge here is the firewall.
Yes.
And it's something that has caused us significant problems. Our site speed is very poor in China, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. Every time we make an effort to correct it, some other problem occurs. So that's one of the reasons why to really be big in China, you need a Chinese partner, you need to be inside and perceived as a local company.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. But I wanted to thank all the great debates, and I think if there's nothing else, I think we're going to remember the story about the birds. Thank you very much.
Hey, that's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Li Chang.
Good morning. That was a wonderful panel session, and we have something special coming up right after. So for those of you who I haven't met, my name is Chang. I work at GSV with the wonderful team that co-hosts this conference. And, but you all didn't come to see me, you came to see Jeremy Bailenson. So Professor Jeremy Bailenson studies the psychology of virtual reality, and he's the founding director of Stanford University's Virtual Human Interaction Lab. I think in layman's terms, that means that he is basically the person that you have to talk to about virtual reality and augmented reality. So we're very excited to have him. In addition to teaching at Stanford, Jeremy studies the effects of VR and how it can transform education, environmental conservation, empathy, and health. He has published over 100 papers on communication, computer science, education, environmental science, law, marketing, medicine, political science, and psychology. And he consults pro bono on VR for US government agencies. And his first book was quoted by the US Supreme Court, although he has yet to speak at ASU GSV Summit until today. He is an educator, a scientist, an author, a visionary. He is Jeremy Bailenson. Please welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Lee, for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank GSV and Arizona State University for throwing what's just an amazing conference. The conversations I've had over the last day have just been special, and this lineup of speakers it's truly amazing, so it's a privilege for me to be here. My background, my PhD is in psychology. In 1999, my degree was in using VR to model the human mind. I then left that field of cognitive science and went and did a postdoc where I learned how to build the hardware and do the programming to build immersive virtual reality, and then to run experiments to figure out how the brain functions on VR. So for 20 years, I've been building immersive virtual reality and testing to see the effects on the mind and testing to see which applications work. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to talk about the technology, how it works, why now is a very special moment. We're then going to talk about research findings from my academic lab focused on education, how experience in VR can change the way you think and behave later on, and we're going to conclude by showing how those academic studies that began in the lab actually became products that people and governments and companies are using now. Raise your hand. How many of you guys have been in virtual reality? Raise them high. About 30 of you. How many of you guys have walked in virtual reality, not just looked? Okay, very good. I brought VR for you today. After this talk, if you go to the Tomorrowland exhibit, we brought a high-end, full room scale tracking VR where you will get to test out some of the things that I brought today. So for those of you that haven't tried it, I want you to watch this video and to tell me, excuse me. So this person, he is about, oh, there we go, you are watching the video. Tell me what you think this person is doing. Call it out, please. Walking on it. He is walking the plank. So I want to show you that again. Let's do that again. The room that he's in looks just like the physical room. It's a 3D model. What we've done, though, is we've dropped a chasm, okay? A 10-meter drop, and we put a little rickety plank, and he's got to walk across this plank to get to the other side. If you've seen Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote, the cartoon, it's just like that. I want to go back in time. In 2001, I dragged all of my hardware, put it on a plane, went to Washington, D.C., did a demonstration for a conference for federal judges and lawyers. We were talking about courtroom applications of VR, how you could use it, for example, to recreate crime scenes or to do witness testimony inside VR. And we gave a demo of the pit to an elderly man. He was probably in his late 60s. He was a federal judge, a large man, and as he was walking over the plank to try to get to the other side, he just took a little bit of a step off to the side. We modeled gravity, and he fell down. Now, if you were in the physical world and you wanted to save your life, what would you do? You would dive at a 45-degree angle and try to catch the other side of the lip. So here we are in DC with all these lawyers and judges, and this gentleman from out of nowhere dove physically, okay? It gets worse because it was my first public demo and there was a sharp corner of a table where my computer was, and his face was going right towards it. So I had one move. I dove at him, redirected his trajectory. He was okay. Nobody got sued. I didn't end up in jail. He was a good sport about it, actually. But the point of this story is to illustrate psychological presence. When VR is done well, the brain treats it as if it were real. It's not a media experience. It's like you're doing something. So if you can take one point from this talk, as you think about virtual reality in education and your other applications, think of it as an actual experience, not as a media experience. In March 2014, we host a lot of visitors to the lab. In March 2014, we brought Mark Zuckerberg to the lab. He spent about 2.5 hours doing demos, some of which you'll get to do later today, and then talking about the applications that we'll talk about today: communication, entertainment, more importantly, empathy, and issues of poverty and conservation. Zuck comes 2 weeks later. He buys this tiny little company that no one has ever heard of called Oculus, spends what we now know is $3 billion on Oculus. The day after that happens, the New York Times runs a front page article in the business section saying the visit to Bailenson's lab was in part responsible for Zuck buying Oculus. And since then, even though I'm a professor, which is what I do most of the time, it's been important to me to engage with these companies all these companies are ones I spend substantial amounts of time with. All of them, I promise you, have 8 or 9 figure budgets about virtual reality. So this is the time for you guys to start thinking about how to incorporate the tech. To give you a sense, the helmets that I was using, again, I've been doing this since the late 1990s. It used to be the helmets that we put you in, the ones on your right side, cost more than my car. The ones that we're using now in the lab are twice as good, but they cost less than the price of a dinner. So we're really at a tipping point here, and we are now starting to see large events where entire classes can see this at scale. This is in Barcelona last year, where thousands of people are inside of virtual reality. But where I add value to you guys today is not to talk about the hardware. This is my grandfather. He's 91 years old, and when I finally got him into VR, he kind of looked around and he said, well, what am I supposed to do in here? And for those of you that raised your hand about VR, if I'm going to predict that your response was, this is pretty cool, and it's a neat technology, but I'm really not sure how I would use it tomorrow. It's a cool thing, but it's not jumping to me what I would do tomorrow. What we're going to spend the rest of today talking about are applications that are ready to use tomorrow. To be clear, I do not believe VR is an every minute thing. If 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you guys are using VR to check your email, then I believe as a field we have failed miserably. VR is not free. It's distracting. People are going to walk into walls, step on cats, get mugged in the subways because they can't see anything. It's arguably addictive when you think about the best party you've ever been to. If every social media event feels that way, or gambling feels like you're in Las Vegas, or pornography feels like sex, these intense experiences will become addictive. It's fatiguing for the visual system. In my lab, we have a 20-minute rule. So we can go on and on about the costs of VR, but just to be clear, I don't think you should use it for everything. We are going to talk today about reserving this intense experience that the brain treats as real for very special experiences, one that are impossible to do in the real world, one that are so expensive and rare you can't do it easily, ones that would be counterproductive to do in the real world, meaning it's an experience that adds value to your psychological life, but you wouldn't want to do it physically. And finally, ones that are dangerous. VR gets its history from flight simulators. Why do we have flight simulators? Because you should be able to learn by doing. You should be able to learn when mistakes are free, and that's the model of the flight simulators that was raised in the late 1920s. So to sum up this guideline, don't use VR for everything. Save it for the things that are special. The first example is going to be teaching diversity and empathy. In the year 2003, my lab was first funded by a company named Cisco, and a brilliant woman named Marcia Satowski. She said, Jeremy, can you use VR to do a better way to teach tolerance, diversity, and other things of that nature? And I said, let's build the virtual mirror. Okay? So the virtual mirror, what's going to happen in this video, we're going to induce what's called body transfer. Body transfer, a famous paper published in 2007 in the journal Science. If you move your physical body around and your avatar's mirror image moves with you in synchrony, meaning when you move your right arm, the mirror image moves its right arm, after about 4 minutes, the part of the brain that has a self schema incorporates that mirror image into the self, meaning you truly believe that is you in the mirror and you when you look down first person. This research leverages something called the contact hypothesis, a sociological theory to simplify it, which says if you take two different groups and you put them together, they're going to learn to get along. I wanted to take that a step further. What if instead of being around someone else, you literally became them? So watch this movie, please. He's walking around in the physical world. This is a 2003 quality VR video, so excuse the graphics. Walks up to a virtual mirror, and he's a white male. He goes to the mirror. I sped it up. He spends about 4 minutes doing body transfer in reality, but we're going to give you a few seconds. He bends down the knee, comes back up. I hit a button. He's now a woman of color. Okay? The next step in this is he turns around, and I'm not going to show that in this video. He turns around. We network in a second person into virtual reality. So he looks down. He still is a woman of color. We bring in a second person, and that person proceeds to say horrible things and do horrible things about that person's race and gender. So the sequence is become someone else, feel like you're wearing their body, and then experience prejudice firsthand. In my lab, since 2003, we've been publishing papers that demonstrate this treatment, becoming someone else, experiencing trauma firsthand, causes more change in behavior and attitudes than role-playing, than watching videos, than reading case studies. I've been publishing this in academic journals for over a decade. It works. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, he came to my lab in 2015. He came because he wanted to think about VR as entertainment, but after a 3-hour session where we really talked about the applications that we're discussing today, Adam Silver walked out of there, and Eric Hutcherson, the head of HR for the NBA, really believing that the Home Run app was not watching basketball games in VR, but helping people really understand the plight of others. And then after that, a few months later, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the National Football League, he came to the lab. To his credit, he and Troy Vincent, the VP of Operations, who's a really forward-thinking gentleman, because they wanted to think about, can we use the National Football League as a beacon to think about a better way to train diversity? And I'm very proud to announce that as of this National Football League Combine about 8 weeks ago, we debuted a diversity simulation trainer where people get to interview others, and they get to practice different genders, different ages, different races, and they get to go in VR and conduct these interviews and to really try to get better at doing the mistakes that all of us make when we engage into social interactions. Remember the flight simulator, you should be able to make mistakes and learn how to be better when you don't have to hurt someone by being wrong. Next line of research is about altruism and helping behavior. So it turns out that there is a vast literature, not from my lab, hundreds of studies from around the world that show if you play these really intense, violent video games for hours and hours a day, you will be more aggressive in the physical world. We model media experiences. But what if you wanted to do the opposite? Give someone a really intense experience, but instead of killing somebody or killing 100 people in an hour, you're saving a life. Will that experience transfer the same way that we know the aggressive ones do? And so here is a demo where people become a superhero.
There has been an earthquake warning and the city has been evacuated. A child has been unaccounted for and the parents have informed authorities that their child is diabetic and will go into shock without insulin. You have a vial of insulin in your pocket. Your task is to fly through the city to find the child and deliver the insulin, saving the child's life. As soon as you see the child, call out. You must indicate to the experimenter that you found the child, so please clearly announce that you see the child when the child comes into view. You may now begin your search. Lift your arms above your head to take off from the ground.
Very intense experience. The floor is shaking, wind coming at him, tracking his every movement, The folks, the astronauts from NASA say this is the closest they've ever been to space walking on Earth when they come here. Really intense. People sweat.
Thankfully, you've reached the child before diabetic shock set in. You hand the syringe to the child who injects the insulin. You have now completed your task and saved the child's life.
So people get really excited by this task. They get really excited by it. And when they save the child's life, they feel good. What we then do is we borrow a paradigm from social psychology. We have an actress fake an accident. We videotape everyone, and we look to see how helpful they are. When you become a hero, have a superpower, save a life, everybody helps. The control condition, you ride passively in a helicopter and maybe tour the city. A lot of people don't help. On average, they help more slowly and less thoroughly. So that may sound kind of hokey to you guys, that becoming a hero in VR makes you nicer in the physical world. But if you believe the hundreds and hundreds of studies that show the opposite, which is we model violent media, you should believe that if we build good stuff, they'll follow that too. The next line of work is about conservation. So one of my heroes is Dr. Jane Lubchenco. She was the head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under President Obama for 4 years. In that 4-year window, there were more natural disasters than any other 4-year window in US history. Scientists, in consensus, climate change is causing these disasters, but a major portion of lawmakers and people in the population still do not buy that the climate change is causing these changes. This quote from her, when people directly experience something, they see it in a different light, comes from Dr. Lubchenco. Her story is that when she goes to visit these cities that have been devastated by flood or other natural disasters, the people there, it doesn't matter what their politics were, they now understand, because they have a direct experience, how intense climate change is. And there's a great quote that she has from a lawmaker who says, literally, "I have seen the light." That's a direct quote. After an intense experience, he said, "I've seen the light." He now understands climate change. In VR, natural disaster is free. One of our more famous studies in this area involves cutting down trees. So it turns out that soft, fluffy toilet paper that we all love, it comes from non-recycled pulp. 50% of the pulp comes from second growth forests. 10% of the pulp for that soft, fluffy toilet paper comes from virgin trees. This article comes out that describes this process in 2009 in the New York Times. A woman named Leslie Kaufman. I live in the hippiest place on the planet in the Bay Area, California. And many stores do not carry recycled toilet paper. The ones that do, you've got to hunt and peck to find it. So how do you get people to change behavior? Why are we continuing to deforest for arguably a not essential task? We brought subjects to the lab, gave everybody those statistics, and had 3 groups of subjects. One group read a beautifully written narrative, would we like to cut down a tree? The second group saw a video shot from the shoulder of a lumberjack. And the third group put on the helmet, had a haptic device that shook their hand like a chainsaw, had to move their arms. We call this embodied cognition. It's really important to get the body involved. The tree crashed down, the floor shakes in my lab, the floor bounces up and down. Really intense experience. When you come to this experience, people will come in and they'll go shopping, and I'll get a phone call 3 months later. "Jeremy, I went down the toilet paper aisle at the supermarket and I thought of you." And I'm delighted to do that. I'm delighted to be thought of in that nature. But we never trust what people say. In our experiment, when you ask them pre and post, everyone says they're going to use less paper just by the stats that I just gave you. But as you all know, it's really hard to change conservation behavior. It's hard. It's hard to carpool. It's hard to sort your garbage. It's hard to go back inside and turn out your lights. In our studies, we follow them in the physical world, and this study is replicated. When you cut down the tree, use 20% less paper than the other 2 conditions, 20%. This study is also replicated in another city. Now, if I were to teach you conservation about deforestation by forcing you to go and cut down trees, that would be a really bad way to teach the lesson. In VR, you get the best of both worlds. It feels real, but nobody's harmed. What I brought to show you here today is something I'm extremely proud of. In a 3-year process for a grant funded by the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation with my colleague Roy P., an educational technologist, and Fiona McKelly, a brilliant marine scientist, we have built a 7-minute field trip to learn about ocean acidification. How many of you guys have heard of ocean acidification? So in a room of very smart people, less than a third of you. That's okay. I didn't know it earlier before I met Fio. It turns out when humans produce CO2, a third of that gets absorbed by the ocean. When ocean absorbs CO2, a chemical reaction we all learned about in 7th grade happens. The water becomes more acidic. The pH level goes down the same way that when you add bubbles to water to make seltzer, it's a little acidic. When the water gets more acidic, we have a disaster for all of humanity because the coral reefs will die, the fish will die, we won't have food by the year 2100. How do we know this? My colleague Theo McKelly has discovered and researches this very special reef in the Mediterranean where there are underwater vents that cause the water to become more acidic and basically simulate how all the world's oceans will look by the year 2100. So we spent years, thousands of hours to produce a field trip. So one of my roles at Stanford, I work with the provost to figure out, to rethink what we mean by online learning. I don't want to replace the classroom. I want to add field trips. I want the best field trip that you have ever been on in your entire life. I want it so that every single person with a $20 helmet can experience that. So I brought this for you to do today in the other room. It's a 7-minute journey. We have brought this to the US Senate to show senators. We've put this in high schools. We put it in colleges. But what I'm most proud of is as of a month or two ago, we put this online for free on something called Steam, which is the iTunes of VR. So anyone with a helmet can now download this for free. I want to build a lot more of these field trips. Developmental research. A lot of questions I get is about, well, can kids do this? And the big tech companies, they call me to ask me what I think their age ranges should be, and I'm very careful not to give them an answer there. My PhD student, Jackie Bailey, is about to publish what is likely to be the canonical study on the developmental issues with kids. There's been very few studies that look at children and how they use VR. I'll show you this video here just to give a sense of the reaction from a child.
I'll have him do a couple things for us, okay? Ready? Oh, hello there! It's Design, your lovable furry friend Grover. Hi. Get up out of your chair and dance with us. Follow our crazy moves. You can do it. Okay. All right.
So this is Jackie Bailey's dissertation. It's funded by Sesame Street, a Sesame Workshop. And the good news is she's showing that nobody gets hurt. Kids come in for 5 minutes with their parents. It's a large sample of 5-year-olds. That's Sesame's demographic. And the kids are fine. On the not so good news, as you can see by that child's reaction, the content delivered via VR is really persuasive. They comply. When Grover asks you to dance in VR, you dance. When Grover asks you to dance on TV, not so much. So I won't go into too much detail on that study, but I want to assure this room that my lab and others are starting to look at this issue with kids in VR. And we have no real answers for it yet, but we are examining it. In the last few minutes, I want to focus on training. I know that a lot of us care about STEM education, but in my opinion, and I've been studying VR for 20 years, the first real success of VR in terms of people out using it in the world, arguably the first B2B success in the history of VR, depending on how you count it, is my former grad student Derek Belch's company called Striver. So Derek was the field goal kicker for the Stanford team in 2005. After my virtual people class, which he took, he said, Jeremy, can we use VR to train athletes? I said, Derek, it's a brilliant idea, but the tech is not ready yet. Come back in a decade and we'll build it. He did. He came back in 2014, got his master's degree in my lab while he was an assistant coach on the Stanford football team. And what we built was quarterback trainer. It started as a quarterback trainer, it now trains everybody. But it was just about putting a quarterback on the line of scrimmage. He has about half of a second to read the defense, recognize the defense, and decide if he's going to change the play. He gets extra mental repetitions and just gets to, in addition to his physical practice, have hours, if he wants it, per week of extra mental practice where he gets to just repeat until he's perfect. After 3 weeks, Coach Shaw saw it was working so well that he made it mandatory for all of the QBs and all of the running backs to train who have to make those decisions. Kevin Hogan, the quarterback in 2014, says that the best games of his season, I would never take credit for this, but he says the best games of his season and career at that point were after he used this product to really get better and really feel comfortable in the pocket. So Derek graduates January 2nd, 2015, and he forms a company called Striver. Striver is changing the way athletes train in just about every sport there is. This is Carson Palmer for the Arizona Cardinals. He's actually got a system in his house. He uses it for just a couple minutes a day. That's all he needs. These are some of the teams that Derek is training with. These are not all the teams because a lot of teams don't want to give away their competitive advantage. But what I can say, because I help him in this process, this is the first time I've ever seen people using VR, not just for a kind of a gimmick or not just for something that you do every once in a while. They're getting better because they use it. Now, Derek, his company took funding from a venture capital firm about 6 months ago, and what's happened since is because when you take money, you've got to get massive. We're learning that all the lessons that we use to train football players, put someone in an intense scene, have them scan a room, make a decision quickly. It works for the employee in a large retailer on Black Friday. It works for the person at the deli counter who's got to see if there's a safety issue. And we're now working with a number of companies, including one of the largest retailers in the world, to transform the way they train employees. Everything we discussed in terms of making quarterbacks better, you get the same effect for just about any job that requires training that you want to be consistent, training that you want to feel really intense as opposed to reading a workbook or watching skits. And what we're seeing from the clients that are using this is it's a really good use case for the technology. I will close on the future of communication. So I met a bunch of you last night. I'm going to be here giving VR demos for the next 4 or 5 hours. It's awesome to meet you. I love it. However, we cannot continue to grow on this planet 9 billion, 10 billion, 11 billion, and continue to fly and commute the way that we do. For 20 years, I've been building technology and testing the efficacy of technology that really tests what I call the virtual handshake. I mean, I want to feel like I know you. I want eye contact to work. I want my body posture to work. As you all know, if I were Skyping into this talk, it wouldn't be as good. There's something about this physical presence. You know, I look at you, you're a fantastic audience. You are engaged. I feel present with you, and you feel present with me. If it was Skype, if it were a video conference, it wouldn't work. I'm trying to find the best of both worlds. I'm trying to find the level of fidelity of an avatar in communication that can make it so that I don't fly. 3 weeks ago, I flew 28 hours to go to Sarawak in Borneo to talk to the government about how to incorporate VR into their economy. I gave an hour-long talk and then flew back 30 hours with the wind. I want that to stop. I want to look back on my father who commutes every single day from Peekskill to the Bronx, an hour and 15 minutes each way. When you watch a movie from the 1970s and you see somebody, a doctor smoking cigarettes over a patient's open heart cavity, you say, can you believe they did that? I want us to say that about the commute. Can you believe that people got in these boxes and followed each other in these boxes so they could sit down at a cube and type all day and then get back in that box? I don't want to eliminate travel. We should travel when we want to, but not when we have to. And I'm delighted to say the Department of Energy has just announced a large funding initiative to have folks like me and my colleagues build systems to replace travel. And one of our other speakers here, Adam Ghazali, I don't know if he's around, he and I are collaborating on a project to do that. So a lot of exciting stuff. I'm here all day. I'm not a VR evangelist. I don't play video games. I don't do social media. I'm not pushing this tech on you. I'm really honest when it doesn't work. So come find me, ask me if the VR solution that you have in mind is good for you, and I'm really findable over email. So thank you very much. I look forward to meeting you later on.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Louise Rogers.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Louise Rogers. For people who don't know me, I am, amongst other things, an advisor to the GSV Education Tech Fund. And doing that, I learned an enormous amount about venture capital and how it works and how people think. And I spend as much time as possible as I can talking to startup companies under the tutelage of Deborah Quazzo and Michael Moe particularly, who've taught me everything I know. And one thing I wanted to say today before we start was to thank them for putting on this amazing conference and also for supporting pretty much everybody who's here, both companies and individuals. So if Deborah and Mike have taught me everything that I know to date on venture capitalists, I'm just about to learn an enormous amount more because I have the pleasure of moderating this conversation with two of the most distinctive and successful venture capitalists on the planet. More importantly, I think both of them, as well as being incredibly successful in what they do, are really driving thought leadership in this sector. So I'd like to introduce you to Mike Maples and Tim Draper. Welcome.
Thank you. This is terrific. We didn't quite hear you backstage.
Didn't you?
I
was talking about your songwriting and...
Oh, good.
Not yet.
Terrific.
A couple of dirty dogs about
here
to
we
join.
go. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to introduce you, if that's possible, and tell the audience a little bit about you. I'm sure they know some, but Tim, we'll start with you. Tim's been in the news for the last couple of days with an announcement that he's going to become one of the most prominent venture capitalists to back initial coin offering, which he has steered away from up to this point, although has been a big proponent of both Bitcoin and blockchain. But he's just announced a new high-profile backing of Tezos, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit going forward. But he's also the founding partner of Draper Associates, which then became DFJ. And Tim's original suggestion was to use viral marketing as a method of spreading software application from customer to customer. And obviously, that concept was very instrumental to the success of Hotmail, Skype, and others. And in fact, as I think about it, pretty much every company I know. Investments, well, 600, I think you told me backstage, so a huge number. But those include Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, Overture, and also with Draper Associates, Twitch, TV, YePay, AngelList, a whole variety. I mean, you name it, he's there. He's been recognized as a leading supporter of entrepreneurship with numerous awards and honors. I'm going to tell you a few of those. It's pretty impressive. He was listed as number 46 of the most outstanding Harvard alumni, number 7 in the Forbes Midas list, and number 1 of the most networked venture capitalists by Always On, and number 98 in Worth magazine's 100 most powerful people in finance. He also received the World Entrepreneurship Forum's Entrepreneur for the World 2015. He served on the Californian State Board of Education in the late 90s and is currently leading an initiative to create 6 new states in California. That's really complicated.
Sounds a little like Brexit.
Yeah, well, hopefully not that complicated. To encourage competition and choice in government. He created a non-profit for young children to learn about business and entrepreneurship called BizWorld, and then a real love of his life, Draper University of Heroes, where he spends a lot of his time, which is a residential and online school helping young people meet their entrepreneurial goals. And maybe we can talk a bit about that going forward. Went to Stanford and Harvard and is a songwriter in his spare time. So if it all goes
Risk
wrong,
master.
It's not a big seller, but it's out there.
Do you have any spare time? Because that feels like a really busy schedule. So that's hopefully I got everything right there. So Mike, can I turn to you?
Yes.
Mike is the founder and managing partner of Floodgate, a super angel business. He's been named as one of the 8 rising VC stars by Fortune magazine for his investments. He became a full-time investor. Before becoming a full-time investor, Mike was an entrepreneur himself, an operating executive who worked in a number of consumer technology, small business, enterprise, and technology companies. So he understands the functions as well as the concepts. He has experience in product development, marketing, business development, and corporate strategy. He began his technology career in high school, and he started a software business developing games and educational products for the original IBM. And he also co-founded Motive Inc., the world's leading broadband software company in the 1990s, and developed that from a startup to sales of over 75 million. Prior to Motive, he was responsible for worldwide product marketing at Tivoli Systems, where he managed the company's product portfolio right up to the 1995 IPO. Then there's, of course, his list of investments: Twitter, very early investor, Twitch, Chegg, Dig, Weebly, Spiceworks, Demandforce, to name just a few. In his spare time, he is an artist and amateur movie maker. And he holds an engineering degree from Stanford, an MBA from Harvard, and is also a guest lecturer at numerous universities on entrepreneurship. He was just named number 20 on the Forbes Midas list because his seed fund has been the most successful of all time. But he's probably best known for coining the phrase thunder lizards. And it's a metaphor that he derived from Godzilla, which describes the tiny number of truly exceptional companies which wildly disrupt. And he says what he does is search for the atomic eggs. So thank you both of you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
So I suppose my first question is, why are you here? So
First,
why come to an
okay, well, I'll answer that. First, I want to thank Michael Moe and Michael Crow. It's like the beginning of a rap. Michael Moe from GSV and Michael Crow from ASU. They are true innovators, and clearly education needs innovation. I mean, it's amazing. Everything around us has gotten better over the last 50 years. Your shoes, your food, your cell phone, your whatever. Everything's gotten better except education in America. And I think that is just horrible. And I believe that it has to do with the fact that education is not really a market system, that there are forces that are keeping it from being a market system. And whenever we see a monopoly or an oligopoly in an industry as venture capitalists, we look for little opportunities for entrepreneurs to come in there and change those industries, because a monopoly generally provides bad service at a really high cost. And if you have an opportunity to start a company that will somehow chip away at that, the monopoly provides sort of an umbrella for you as a startup. So I'm constantly looking, knowing that education has actually decreased in quality over the last 50 years. I'm looking for, and cost has gone up. I'm looking for those startups like Coursera that you just saw and others to come and really transform education. The monopolies, of course, are the teachers' union and the textbook manufacturers and the education establishment, and they don't want anything to change. They're perfectly happy with it the way it is. Of course, the children probably care. And so I'm actually looking and saying, hey, where is it that we can really change things? And this kind of a conference is fabulous, creating new education technologies, new kinds of ways of driving education. I think it's fantastic. And basically, that's why I'm here.
Great. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been looking at education from 2 points of view. One is, K to 12 through college, and the types of investments I've been making there have been pretty practical. So I don't know how many of you have heard of Chegg for textbook rentals, but the idea there was that the price of these textbooks coupled with the fact that students were having these huge loans, it just isn't right. And that the opportunity to rent textbooks seemed like a good idea. And then over time, Chegg evolved their model. Another company, in fact, I saw Tyler in the halls, Clever, is also, some of you may have worked with them or know about them, but you know, they're also solving just a very practical problem in K to 12. And so when I've thought about primary education, most of the time I've been trying to find stuff that's really inefficient, that people wish the government would solve or people wish somebody would solve, and it's just never going to happen. And so an entrepreneur comes in with an enterprising idea and solves it. And then on the other big area of interest for me is lifelong education. And so, you know, the tech industry has created incredible abundance. You know, and Moore's law and Metcalfe's law are both exponential, and you know, we have a supercomputer in our pocket, and everybody benefits from that. But only a small number of us have benefited from the abundance of tech careers. And I believe that when military veterans come out of the service, or when people become unemployed or underemployed in areas that used to be manufacturing centric, that we need to do a better job finding ways to educate those people in the new skills that connect them to the jobs that bring abundance in careers. And you know, we've got 1 million advanced manufacturing jobs unfilled. We've got 2 million data science jobs unfilled in the United States. And so, you know, I'm also very interested in finding the people in dead-end jobs or looking for purpose in life that could fill those empty jobs. And I believe that, you know, the power of networks and data and software will be very important there. So those are the kind of my frame of reference is I'm trying to find the prime movers, the entrepreneurs who will start the companies that solve big problems in those two areas.
And both of you, when we were preparing for this session, talked a lot about your optimism and that being your driving force. I wanted you to talk a bit more about that, because you were definitely wanting to talk about the fact that most of the discussion in VC is about disruption, and you wanted to talk about creativity and growth. Tim, can I start with you?
Sure. I have always been optimistic, and I guess it's driven from my family. My father wrote the Startup Game, and if you read it, you'll just feel like the future looks, you know, Pollyanna-ish, misty, and I think that it's interesting. If you go through life, you realize that, you know, pessimists might be right some of the time, but it's the optimists that do things that actually win and get done and change things and move progress along. And I feel like you've got to be an optimist to make something great happen. Draper University of Heroes, we say, I will fail and fail again until I succeed, or I will pursue the world with gusto and enthusiasm. And these are sort of core tenets for people who really want to do something extraordinary with their lives and to take big chances. And I've had a great opportunity to watch as the Silicon Valley went from prune yards and apricot groves to this bustling, extraordinary area where whenever anybody looks at anything, they think, how can I make it better? How can I build a better business than this business? How can I improve the customer experience? And that, and watching as that starts to happen and how customer experience continues to improve can make you only an optimist. It's amazing how life has improved over time for all of us, or for the vast majority of us. And it just does. And that's why education is such an anomaly. Somehow the world has allowed probably the most important industry in the world to languish, is that the word? While the rest of the industries are just booming. So that's kind of why I'm an optimist. I think, hey, we can make anything better.
That's great. Mike?
Yeah, I guess I look at it like I think that Silicon Valley is doing a very poor job of making the case for abundance. And I think instead what's the narrative that's kind of getting all the oxygen in the room is a bunch of hoodie-wearing young people trying to disrupt people. And, you know, I guess to me, I think we're going through a new phase of capitalism that's going to be incredible. You know, like if you look historically, in the year 1820, there were no companies in America with more than 100 employees. And the railroad, the steam engine came out, and we had the birth of the modern corporation, and it increased the standard of living for the average person 14-fold from the year 1820 to 2000. I believe that the animating forces of the economy going forward are Moore's Law and Metcalfe's Law. Moore's Law is about transistors and computation, exponential improvement. Metcalfe's Law is about the value of a network being a square of the function, a square of the number of nodes. And I believe that those two animating forces, because they're both exponential, have the potential to bring abundance to every man, woman, and child in the world if we don't get in the way of our own progress. But narratives matter. And if the narrative becomes hoodie-wearing disruptors building robots that are going to eat everybody's job, we won't make progress as fast as if we make a mature and intelligent case for the abundance that networks and computing can bring to people throughout the world. And so the reason that I'm optimistic is that I know that because those two laws are exponential, that they can bring the same kind of progress that we saw from 1820 to 2000. And you know, we talk all about wealth inequality, that matters. We talk about everybody need to participate in the prosperity, that matters too. But we should honor the fact that in the year 2000, poor people in the United States have flushing toilets, running water, electricity, food. Other than food, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the richest man in America in 1870, had none of those things. So we've literally had to redefine what it means to be poor because we've created so much abundance. And so while we need to bring everybody forward, we also need to be realistic about the value of abundance and the importance of it and the need to fight for it as we fight for the future.
Mike, I have to ask you to tell everyone your little Elvis saying that you tell me, because I think that was fantastic.
Yeah, so you know, people talk about entrepreneurs disrupting things, and just my experience in the founders I've worked with, they never start these companies as an act of disruption. They started as an act of creativity and love for the idea. And you know, I like to say Elvis didn't set out to disrupt jazz, he set out to create rock and roll. And you know, that to me is what entrepreneurs really do. Like the guys who started Lyft, Logan and John, didn't say, here's my nefarious plot to upset taxis. They wanted to empower people to share rides. And you know, Osman and Ayush, when they started Chegg, didn't say, I'm going to disrupt the textbook people. They said, it's outrageous that students get ripped off by these high prices. Let's fix that. And so, like, I just think that I understand that disruption is a powerful metaphor, but I think it's been dumbed down as a term. Disruption is a lagging indicator of a big business not reacting to change. It's not a leading indicator of what the entrepreneur is trying to do. The entrepreneur is trying to create, not disrupt. And that's another place where I just think the narrative is wrong. I think it's wrong-minded.
And I suppose my next question is really about if you are investing in education companies and ideas, do you think that there is a different mindset that you yourselves use to make those decisions, or is it the same across all sectors? Is education different? Do you have to think differently about it?
I don't. I look at every entrepreneur individually, and I look and I see, first, is the business defendable? So can you go do it, or is it something easy for somebody else to replicate and somebody with more money to just knock off the game? So the first thing I'm doing is really looking at the general marketplace that they're going after. But then, you know, once they've cleared market size and technological advantage hurdles, then I meet with the entrepreneur, and the things I'm looking for are, is it just bursting out of their chest? Is it something that they just have to have happen? And the way I pull that out of them is I say, so why are you doing this? And it turns out that question turns out to be a really good one, because some of them back away and say, well, I had a friend, it was his idea, and I'm not sure, or I'm doing it to make money. And that isn't good enough, because when the money's gone, you still want the entrepreneur to be driving, living off peanut butter and no indoor plumbing. But if they say, because this is the way it's gotta be, I've been telling my boss over and over, this is the way, and the boss kept saying no, and he just didn't get it, but boy, the customer's gonna be so much better off because of this. That's when we back the entrepreneur.
Yeah. You all know what to do now.
All right. I think there are a couple things that we've focused on. One is we like to back education startups that have complete control over their destiny and ability to make it happen. So we don't necessarily like ideas where the government's got to help, or the teachers union's got to help, or whatever kind of entrenched incumbent gatekeeper has to help. And then the other thing that we like, and I think it's very similar to what you're saying, Tim, is I like entrepreneurs who are going to do it even if they can't raise the money. And so I don't really like it when a founder comes and pitches me and says, I'll do this if I can get funding. I like founders who say, this is happening, and I'd love to have you along for the ride, but make no mistake, this is happening, and I will find a way to do it no matter what. Because to me, when an entrepreneur depends on a VC for their success, that is weak and apologetic. And when an entrepreneur says, I'm happy to have you ride shotgun if you're the best partner, that's what I'm looking for. I want to fund an exciting entrepreneur with an exciting growth story that is going to happen. And I'm there to help them, but I'm not there. It's not happening because of me. It's happening because of them and their animating power as a prime mover to make change.
And do you have to like all the entrepreneurs that you back? And do you have to understand them culturally? And do you have to have the same drive or not? Or do you back people that you think,
no,
I don't want to have to drink with that person?
They don't have to be my best friend. No, absolutely not. And it's interesting, they come from all walks of life. In fact, I'd say immigrants are a large majority of the entrepreneurs I back, and they have very different cultures and different ways of looking at things. But that's what makes them really interesting to me, and so I grow to like them. And it's interesting, my daughter does Halogen Ventures, is that what it's called? Yeah, and she's
You're in trouble now.
Yeah, I know. It's salt of the earth. Is that halogen? Yeah, the lamps, halogen, yeah. Anyway, Halogen Ventures, and she is only backing women. And I think that that's really interesting because, only 18% of the people who originally applied to Draper University were women. All the rest were men. But the ones who applied were extraordinary. And I think there's this big movement. Now we're up to about 35, 40% women. We've been very actively recruiting because that one class with 18% women was very difficult to manage. Just women are good for society, I'd just like you all to know. But backing those women, that's a trend. And if you're just backing women, you put up your hand and say, this is all I'm backing. That's a really clever way to operate in a field that's been around for 50 years. You're really the you don't have to like them right off the bat. You just have to kind of share their vision. You have to kind of I mean, this is what I do. I don't know, other venture capitalists are hugely successful doing very different things, but I just have to sort of get to the vision and start to see what it is they see, and then they teach me about their industry. And then I often have to help them with their business modeling, which is fine. I mean, I don't mind if they haven't figured out how to make money yet, that's still okay. Or how to build customer base or whatever. It's just, do you have the end point where you want to be? And if you have that, and if it's extraordinary enough, then I'm with you. So it isn't like, no, this isn't going to be my, best buddy, but it's going to be somebody who I'm going to have an adventure with. We're going on a journey together.
Yeah, I like to say I like to back folks that I would enjoy getting in trouble with, because I've never not gotten in trouble. Like, I've never seen a startup not get in trouble. Every startup has multiple.
The good ones.
Yeah, every startup has multiple near-death experiences along the way. And so, like, even Twitter, right? For a while, they couldn't keep the servers running, and had all kinds of stuff screwed up. So, it's kind of like, what does it feel like when the chips are down and you're in huge trouble? Are you happy that you went into business with this person, or are you like, oh my gosh, how did I get myself into this? And that ends up being somewhat independent of how good of friends you are. It's more about, do you believe what they believe, and are you willing to fight for it even when you encounter adversity and difficulties and inertia and stupidity? Are you willing to fight in the foxhole when everything looks bad and everybody's telling you you're wrong? As an aside, I think a lot of entrepreneurship is not about trying to please a lot of people. It's about having a contrarian insight that's right and having your early investors and customers believe what you believe. And so, like, I find that early customers don't always buy because they're buying your product. They believe what you believe. And the best early investors aren't people who just think they're gonna buy low, sell high. It's they believe what you believe. And I think that as an entrepreneur, the trick is not to convince everybody, but to find the people very quickly who value your advantages and who believe in your contrarian insight. And don't waste any ergs of energy on anybody else in the early days.
And I want to stick a little bit with that diversity question just for a minute, because we had a fantastic ladies' lunch yesterday where the issues of diversity in Silicon Valley came up, and we were talking about a statistic that Deborah always brings up, and I'm always incredibly shocked about and then forget until the next year appallingly, that something like 6% of founders and leaders of tech companies are women, and I think for leaders of colour it's about 25%. I may have got that slightly wrong. How much do you feel you have a responsibility to shift that dial? Because you are providing, not just you two, but you are providing the lifeblood of that environment. Do you ask those questions? And I suppose one of the reasons I asked is because I don't think I've ever been asked.
I'm responsible to my limited partners who have invested in me, and they've said, this is what I want you to do, and you've got to figure out what are going to be the best companies and where they're going to go. For me, if I start doing something for a purely social reason, their returns go down, and I'm not doing society any favors.
But will their returns go down? I mean, there is, there is.
Well, maybe not. Research. No, I'm backing. I got some award from Astia for backing the most women.
Yeah.
But I did it for purely, economic and geopolitical and customer reasons. It had nothing to do with, it does have something to do with the fact that they're women. It makes them more unique. When they come and visit me and they say, here's my business, it makes them more unique. And I say, wow, you are really stepping out. Because here's something that I learned at Draper University. We've had like 800 students, and they've come from 62 different countries, started 300 companies. And we just did a deal with ASU, by the way, so thank you, Michael Crow, where we've got accreditation through their program, so just a little plug there. But when I look at an entrepreneur, I'm looking at all the great things that entrepreneur can do for society. And I give women an edge generally because I think they're more unique in the fact that they're starting businesses. Much the way somebody coming from Bolivia or Senegal or whatever, and they're coming to the Silicon Valley, they're just getting started and they don't know anybody and they've sort of figured something out and they've come. It's the same kind of thing. It's like this new thing. So why I went back to Draper University is one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to create heroes. We're trying to get entrepreneurs into our program and get them prepared for what they're going to be up against. Every great entrepreneur, if they are a little successful, it's no big deal. But if they're hugely successful, they are going to be attacked from all directions. I mean, just think of Theranos. Attack from all directions. And if you're attacked from all directions, you've got to be very strong in your own body. You've got to be well shielded. You've got to be ready. And so one of the things we do at Draper University is we strip away high school hang-ups. We get rid of those, the things that, oh, if somebody thinks this is going to, mess with them or somebody doesn't like it or whatever, we make sure that they stick to their guns and say, no, this is my vision, this is where I'm going. I'll listen to those people, but I'm not going to change my course just because somebody thinks I'm stupid or somebody thinks I'm doing the wrong thing. And we do a lot of things to do that. We get them into embarrassing situations, we make them fail, we take them through survival training with Navy SEALs and Special Forces and Army Rangers and really like shake them up. We give them 24 hours to go get a job offer on paper, from somebody they don't know. We do amazingly sort of rough and vicious things with these students so that when they come out and they start a business, they can make something extraordinary happen and they won't have that high school hang-up thing. And I think women have a tougher time in high school because they all kind of want to be the same. Guys, it's okay to be that guy who does that weird thing. But if you're that girl that does that weird thing, it's like you're an outlaw and you've been cut out of society. And I think we do a really good job of retraining women and getting them to realize that they can go ahead and stand alone. The greatest entrepreneur I know is Elon Musk. Elon Musk says, we're going to Mars. And everybody looks at him and says, well, he's crazy. And except what happens is the best, 98% of the people think he's crazy. And then 2% of the people think, how can I help that guy get us to Mars? And you know which 2% that is? Those are the best engineers in the world. And they come and so he, just by having that big vision and being willing to stand alone and say something just outrageous like that, he gets surrounded by the best people on the planet. And he builds something, and then suddenly we're all going to Mars, and we never even thought twice about it. We thought, oh yeah, that was my idea way back when.
Mike, do you ask the question?
Yeah, it's interesting because I found out about this almost by accident. So I started investing in a time when lean startups were just becoming a thing. And so, I had this saying, 500,000 is the new 5 million, back in 2005. And one of the things I noticed was I was getting pitched increasingly by people who didn't look like, quote unquote, normal entrepreneurs. And I was like, it's interesting that I'm being pitched by a lot of women, a lot of African-American folks. Why is that? And so my conclusion was that when the capital requirements to start a company collapse, more and more people can raise their hand and say, I'm an entrepreneur. And on some level, minorities who haven't had access to entrepreneurship are almost like new kinds of immigrants coming in. They're like outsiders coming in. And traditionally great startups have been started by outsiders who aren't bought into the status quo. And so the reason that the first partner that I started Floodgate with was Ann Miraco was I was like, okay, if I believe that someday a woman is going to start a company that's worth over $100 billion, a black man's going to start a company, or a woman that's worth over $100 billion, the best way for me to help take advantage of that as well as help it come about is to be gender and ethnically diverse day one and not have to retrofit the firm later. And then it's like just win. And so, you know, before I retire, I'd like us to have, you know, returns that are at least as good, if not better, than Benchmark and Sequoia in our own market, but also do it in a way where it's gender and ethnically diverse. Because to me, that's how the change happens, is when people react to the need to compete that way. And so, like, rather than me go out and be a social justice warrior, like, what I'm trying to do is just, we're trying to lead by example by just winning and having people say, well, I don't think I can win unless I do it sort of more like how they're doing it. But I guess a part of it is, even though it's all about, you know, managing LP's money, totally agree, I have to admit it would be satisfying to be part of backing a company like that and seeing it get all the way to the promised land.
But don't you think if you two just ask the question, you don't have to change any of your decisions, that just asking that question repeatedly, you'd move the dial? Because we all know you hit the targets you measure and you move things that you measure. And actually, just by, I realise that in the hundreds of company presentations I've given to investors or potential acquirers of a company, I have never been asked a question, and worse, I've never brought it up. So isn't that what we have to change?
I think it takes, I get that you put that into your head. It's in my head. It's already in my head. If it's only 18% of the people that are women that are applying to Draper University of Heroes, I'm thinking, that's an extraordinary group. So it's already moving my head.
Yeah.
But the thing for women is, you know, I look and I say there's this, they talk about a glass ceiling. That's, the entrepreneur that started that business is usually the one who's the CEO, and he is not interested in having anyone, women, man, anyone, take his place. So what you do if you're a woman and you want no glass ceiling, you start your own business, and then you can paint the ceiling any color you want. It's you, and you can hire whoever you want, and you can drive up to a point until you're a public company, and then they tell you who you're supposed to hire. But then you have, back Bio Bottoms, it was two women, and it was a biodegradable diaper, and they hired 100 women, and the men in the town started to complain that they were only hiring women. Anyway, they solved the problem. They hired 2 gay men, and then it was like, that was the deal. But I think if you start a business and you're a woman, then you are at the top of the business. You are running it. You don't have to, you know, wait for some man to say this is great. And think of what Mike just said. If you're going to run the business and drive the business, it doesn't matter what venture capitalists, which, you know, what he says to me or what I say, what he says to her or what I say to her. If she's really going to make that business successful, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
you know, she'll be the force of nature. She'll be the Elon Musk.
A woman who started Spanx, right? Never raised money from VCs, right? She just made it happen. So just one other thought. How many folks here have daughters? Yeah, so me too. Ann and I talk about this a lot inside of Floodgate. My view is a lot of startups, they don't start up because there's a bunch of dudes who are biased against women. It's just they know each other. And startups are kind of a tribal warrior kind of culture where it's about trust and having each other's back. And so I've encouraged my girls in college, do projects with guys where you make things together. Because like the PayPal guys, there weren't any women working with them on the stuff they did when they were at Stanford. And so like entrepreneurs go into business with other people they trust. And so, and this I learned in a strong way from Ann. You know, when Ann was at Yale, she made a specific concerted effort to be on the same playing field with the guys in all cases, rather than to kind of say, I'm in this group, they're in that group. And so, like, I would encourage us as parents to do everything that we can to, like, help our girls understand, like, what it's like to work with the guys and what it's like to be part of a gender and ethnically diverse team that produces really awesome stuff. Because that's how somebody becomes part of a startup founding team down the line, is they become a trusted colleague by the prime movers. Yeah.
Right, we've run out of time, which is a real shame, but thank you so much. And
thanks for having us.
thank you for everything. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great. That's fun. Good to see you. Yeah, that's terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Thanks.